In January 2021, something happened that sounds impossible. More shares of GameStop were sold short than actually existed to be traded. At one point, short positions equaled about 113% of the shares available to trade. Think about that for a second. You cannot sell what nobody owns. And yet the market did, again and again. The cost to borrow the stock spiked toward 30% a year, and then higher. So how do you short more of a company than there is company to short? The answer is a quiet, enormous market that sits underneath every single short sale. Almost nobody outside the industry watches it, and it decides who really owns the share you are betting against. Start with a simple question. When you short a stock, where does the share come from? You are selling something you do not own. So first you have to borrow it, and someone has to lend it. That someone is usually a long-term holder who is just sitting on the stock. A pension fund, an index fund, an insurance company. They own millions of shares and plan to hold them for years, so they lend them out for a fee and earn a little extra on assets that would otherwise sit idle. In the middle sits an agent, often a large custodian bank, that arranges the loan, holds the collateral, and manages the risk. This is securities lending, and it is not small. In 2025, it earned lenders over $15 billion on more than $4 trillion of stock and bonds out on loan at any given moment. This is the plumbing behind every short sale in the world, and it is almost completely invisible to the people whose shares are being lent. Here is how the loan actually works, because the details are the whole story. The borrower does not get the share for free. They post collateral, usually cash or safe bonds, worth about 102% of the stock's value, and it is marked to market every single day. If the price rises, they must post more. On cash collateral, the lender pays back interest at a rate called the rebate, and the gap between that rebate and the market rate is the lender's profit. For an ordinary, easy-to-borrow stock, what the trade calls general collateral, that fee is tiny, sometimes 10 basis points a year, a tenth of 1%. Across the whole market, the blended average fee in the second half of 2025 was only about 0.5%. Small numbers, enormous scale, and the scale keeps climbing. Lenders earn about $9.5 billion in 2024, over $15 billion in 2025, and then a record $9.1 billion in just the first half of 2026 on record balances of $4.38 trillion on loan. So most of the time this is a calm, industrial business measured in fractions of a percent. The question is what happens when it stops being calm. Now the mechanism that makes a GameStop possible. Not every stock is easy to borrow. When lots of traders want to short the same name at once, the shares to borrow become scarce, and the trade calls these names specials. The fee is then set by supply and demand like anything scarce. A general collateral stock might cost 0.1% a year. A special can cost more than 4%. A red-hot one can cost far more. The borrow fee on GameStop reached toward 29% a year and beyond. But scarcity alone does not explain shorting more than 100% of a company. For that you need one more idea, and it is the key to the whole puzzle. The same share can be lent more than once. Follow the chain. A pension fund lends a share to a short seller. The short seller sells it into the market to a brand new buyer. That new buyer now genuinely owns a share, and their broker, with permission, can lend it out again to a second short seller. One original share has now backed two separate short positions. Do that across a whole crowded market, and short interest can climb above the number of shares that actually exist. Nothing was faked and no rule was broken. The share was simply reused down a chain. And notice who quietly earns from all of it. The largest lenders on earth are the index funds and ETFs that hold the market for ordinary savers. In their US funds, the manager passes most of the lending income, around 81 to 85%, straight back to the fund. So the machine feeds the shorts and, indirectly, the long-term holders too. January 2021 is what this machine looks like when it runs hot. Short interest in GameStop had climbed above 100% of its tradable shares. Then the price started to rise, and a short seller who has borrowed a share has a very specific problem when the price rises. Their potential loss has no ceiling. On top of that, some lenders recalled their shares. They simply wanted them back, which forced the short sellers to go into the open market and buy shares to return them. But buying to close a short pushes the price up. A higher price squeezes the next short, who also has to buy. That is a short squeeze, and it feeds on itself. In one stretch, short sellers in GameStop were sitting on mark-to-market losses of nearly $20 billion. The people on the other side were not the lenders. The lenders were hedged and simply collected their fee, calm as ever. The ones who got hurt were the funds that had shorted late and heavily, treating a rising borrow fee as a cost to business rather than a warning. The lending market they depended on became the trap that closed around them. So here is the lens. That share you are shorting is not conjured out of nothing. It is lent to you by someone who owns it for the long haul, through a market most investors never see. Most of the time that market is calm and cheap. General collateral, 0.1%, completely invisible. But when a stock gets crowded, the very same plumbing flips. The fee explodes, shares get recalled, and the borrower you depend on can vanish exactly when you need it most. Same market, two completely different regimes. This does not tell you what any particular stock will do next. It tells you something more durable. Behind every short there is a lender, a fee, and a recall risk. And a quiet borrow can turn into a squeeze the moment a crowd piles into the same trade. The forward question worth carrying is this: which crowded short is being set up that way right now? If you want more of the machinery that runs underneath the market, this channel is where it lives.